All right, so the first slide today is a problem statement. This is a V6 policy, so we get to discuss something exciting, different other than V4. So the problem statement is that we currently have a group of organizations. They're called 3X small ISPs. And they currently, based on the current fee structure, there's a disincentive, a financial disincentive for them to receive IPv6. Recently, there's been about 30 organizations that have requested V6, and 24 have abandoned their request presumably after they learned that their fees would increase from $250 to $500 per year. And so we wanted to take a look at seeing if we should remove this fee disincentive through policy. Also note that another way to solve the problem is that the fee schedule itself would be changed. Next slide, please. This is the fee schedule that we're talking about. We're talking about the organizations that are in the 3X small category here. Their current ISP fee is $250 per year. And as you can see, that's only a /24 or smaller IPv4 holdings. But currently, the smallest amount of space you can receive for IPv6 is a /36. So if they receive a /36, they automatically move to the 2X small category, and therefore their fees end up being doubled. So next slide, please. So this is the draft text. The changed text is in red here for those who have the color in front of them. So what we do here is we allow these small organizations to receive a /40, which would allow them to remain in the same category. And to receive a /40, we also have two requirements here. Hold your only a /24 of IPv4, and you have to also have less than a /22. All right, next slide. There's also a second section of this policy here, which is added as letter G in 652. And this is a policy which basically creates a little bit of a reserve area for these organizations so that they can easily expand their allocation when they need to. And this expansion actually does cause a fee change. So if they move from a /40 to a /36, or if their IPv4 holdings increase, their category automatically, or sorry, their allocation automatically increases. So next slide, please. This policy proposal or draft policy recently received its staff and legal. It was posted, I believe, on the website about a week and a half before the meeting. And it had two points from staff for consideration. The first one was a small change was suggested to the problem statement with regard to how ARIN's fees are implemented today. And this is just a minor text change to more accurately describe the fee schedule. And the second was the references in the draft should be 6521 instead of 652, just for clarity perspective of where the text should be inserted into the policy manual. Next slide, please. Right, so our questions for today are, first of all, do you support continuing to work on this policy? Are there any issues with incorporating the suggested staff changes? I don't think there are, and I will happy to add those to the updated text following the meeting, assuming the community would like to continue working on this. And the final question is, are there any issues you think should be addressed in the text, or should we just move forward with this? And if other folks would like to comment on if we should solve this in policy versus encouraging the board in some way to change the fee schedule, that might also be useful feedback to hear from the community.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to actually put myself in first, and then I see John has already jumped a quick second, and we have some hands raised. In general, if the community thinks that from a technical perspective, it makes sense to allocate these this size of block, and because there has been reasons before why there was minimum allocations, and that's committee, that's fine. If there's concerns about fees, and this is just being done to, I'm not going to use the word circumvent, but just try and encourage more adoption through that. You know, the one thing I'd say is the IPv6 fee schedule is interesting, to say the least. And yes, for the most part, it doesn't kick in people's V4 holdings, because with V4, we've generally had a lot more graduated allocation sizes that people end up. But with V6, we have a slightly different problem. So I guess just my only warning is that, you know, if there is strong support that the board needs to lower the fees for a category, that can certainly be looked at. I would just hesitate that is likely only a short-term item. And as V4 starts to deplete and become the lesser of the two protocols, and the V6 starts to become more and more prevalent, which I think many in this community want to see and have done a lot of work towards, people need to understand that we're still going to have to recover the costs that we have, and we'll need to account for that. John, you looked also like you wanted to add something. So when you unmute, you will be able to speak.
So, Paul, thank you. I'd like to just sort of elaborate a bit on what you said, because it is very important. We have a very unusual circumstance here as well. We have the intersection of the nature of ARIN's fee schedule. Unlike other organizations, ARIN's fees are based on the total resources held, and we take the high watermark of your IPv6 holdings versus your IPv4. And that does allow something that's actually pretty interesting. It means that organizations can add V6 generally without increasing their fees. And eventually it means when organizations with both don't need V4, they can return V4. And if everyone did that, ARIN's revenues don't drop in half. So it provides a transition for people from IPv4 resources to comparably sized IPv6. And that way, I think the fee schedule is a remarkable accomplishment. We've actually adjusted the fee schedule in the past. When it was first being considered, people noted it didn't provide enough IPv6 space. So we actually changed the alignment to be even more generous for the amount of IPv6 resources. But IPv6, unfortunately, the smallest IPv4 ISP, if they get the smallest amount of space allowed by our present IPv6 policy, is still getting a very large amount of IPv6 space, far more corresponding than necessarily you'd expect compared to an ISP who has just 1/24. So that puts us in a circumstance where at the very bottom end, it is true that someone could change from one category to the other. I applaud the AC looking at this issue. I will note that changing the minimum allocation is one way of doing it, as Andrew said. Another way of doing it would be to look at the fee schedule, but also they're not exclusive. In other words, nothing prevents folks from considering lowering the size to provide a more modest V6 allocation, even if we do go look at whether we want to change one IPv6 fee category independently. There is some work on fees coming up with the board this summer, and we'll be consulting with the community on that. And so this is something that will be discussed. But ultimately, we also do have to remember changing the entire fee schedule to adjust for this one bridge condition is, on a long-term basis, probably isn't the right move. But looking at the minimum holding and or looking at the fee schedule for one category is a reasonable thing to bring forth as a policy for discussion.
Okay, so let's go. Thank you, John. Kern, let's go to our Q&A first.
Okay, I have Owen Along, Farsight, Security, ARIN AC, support as written, would prefer board address this through fee realignment instead of creating IPv6 nano allocations. But this is what we can do with policy to resolve the issue while within the existing fee structure. More important to resolve the issue and get V6 deployed rather than to cling to optimal allocation strategy.
Okay, so in favor, thank you, Owen. Next Q&A, please.
Brian Jones, Virginia Tech. I support the intent of this policy. I agree with David Farmer that the limit should be a 22. I am for removing impediments to V6 implementation, allocation, and deployment.
Thank you. Let's go to our first raised hand, please.
First raised hand, Chris Woodfield.
Name and affiliation, please.
Hi, Chris Woodfield, ARIN Advisory Council, and Twitter. I support work on this policy, but I have a question, as I am an ARIN AC member, but the policy being worked on predates my tenure by quite a bit. So I was curious as to where the current /40 minimum allocation came from, and what was the mindset, I'm sorry, /36 allocation came from, and what was, what was the mindset behind landing on a /36 in the current policy?
I'm going to ask that we unmute Rob Seastrom, who's the next hand, because we will go to, this is the institutional knowledge. I'm going to put him on the spot and see if he has anything to say. Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So to Chris's question, the original pre-RIR vast deployments of IPv6 were in fact /36s and /35s. And I kind of feel like that number is there as a historical artifact that has been brought forward, even as the /32 sort of default allocation has become institutionalized as the thing that you can just ask ARIN for, and it will be pretty much handed over. Do you have a further question there, Chris, before I go forward with the other stuff that I was going to
Yeah, Chris, does that address your question?
Yeah. Yeah, that addresses my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So Rob, since you were so kind to go on the spot, why don't we give you the floor then?
Sure.
And Rob, do you mind just because I get letters?
Yes.
Can I get the name and affiliation specifically now that you?
Yeah, Rob Seastrom, ARIN Advisory Council. In full disclosure, I was the author for this proposal, and this problem has been around for a while. There was another policy proposal in 2013 that attempted to address the same problem space. It didn't get community support because of concerns about the unintended consequence of incenting undersizing IPv6 allocations, which is a very real problem. I mean, our policy in V6 in general has evolved over time as we who eat, think, and breathe this stuff get rid of IPv4 thinking as it relates to IPv6. And so making sure that we don't incent people to undersize IPv6 allocations in the interest of conservation or not wasting, which is something you care about with V4 and you absolutely don't with V6 because of the orders of magnitude larger size. I think that goal is adequately addressed in the policy with the guardrails that we put in, but we're all ears for further ideas on how to avoid this outcome. So, Paul, to your point about the business issues involved with IPv6 only resource holders becoming a business problem regarding revenue streams, I am eager for that day, and I hope to be part of discussion about how to address that problem. But for the meantime, when we're still on the having to make the curve go up, I'd like to point out that what are the actual numbers here? 3/4 of XXX small organizations IPv6 allocation requests are being abandoned. That represents a very real problem, and I'm in favor of continuing to work on this policy proposal until we reach consensus. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. We have a lovely queue of Q&A, so why don't we clear a few of them out? So let's get the next one, please.
Sure. Leo Vagoda and Polis LLC. I am uncomfortable with the policy development process being used to address issues related to the fee recipient organizations need to pay ARIN. There is no shortage of IPv6 address space and policies that incentivize the allocation of tiny blocks to ISPs increase the risk that the ISP customers will be given really tiny assignments, especially in regions where there is a very limited to no competition in the market.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Next, please, on the Q&A.
Adam Thompson from Merlin. I support this change as currently written. Minimum allocation size needs to be lowered anyway. This is a good justification to do it and does it elegantly.
Okay, one more from the Q&A, please.
Sure, I have two from David Farmer, so I'm gonna combine them.
Yep.
David Farmer, University of Minnesota. I support this policy as written, continued work, and the staff's proposed changes. /40 is minimally sufficient for an ISP, and allocations of /40 should be allocated for 3x small ISPs. He also states that the current /36 was an adjustment to policy because of the previous fee structure.
Okay, let's go to a raised hand to give Beverly a bit of a break.
Kevin, you should be able to speak. State name and affiliation, please.
Thank you. Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. I have significant reservations about this policy. I believe that most of it can be handled through a fee change. Call it an initial ISP block fee for X number of years or whatever. But the 36 has been discussed for years. It was 32 originally. We made it 36. And there was significant discussion to keep it at 36 as the bare minimum to prevent the incentivization of giving out tiny blocks. There's a second problem to all of this which is what is the knock-on effect then with something like 4.10? Are we making it so easy to call yourself an ISP, to get V6, to then get a V4 block? That goes out the window. So there's not only this policy and what it's trying to deal with, there's also the knock-on effect of how this is going to affect other aspects of the NRPM that would need to be addressed. I really believe that in good conscience, this is a fee change or a fee waiver or whatever the case may be that need to be done, and that we're making bad policy to try to get around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, for that. Okay, we're going to close the queues shortly because we are hitting the end of the time that we have allocated for this block. So we'll have about another 60 seconds that will be open. We have a lot of questions to get through. Yes, I see you, Mr. Kern. So if you could either raise your hand if you wish to speak, or put a Q&A in the next minute, I would appreciate it. Okay, let's start clearing some Q&A, please, Beverly.
Aaron Hughes, 6 Connect. I am not in support of further work on this proposal for all the reasons Paul and John mentioned. Also not sure why an org of that size would not just get V6 from their upstreams ISPs, as renumbering is not a hurdle, in my honest opinion, at that size.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Aaron. Next.
Scott Morazat, Internal Revenue Service. I support as written and would equally support addressing it through a fee schedule.
Okay, thank you for that, Scott. Next.
Jonathan Stewart, les.net. For small ISPs, $250 is a real monetary cost barrier for adopting IPv6. 3x small ISP should be able to add IPv6 without additional cost. This proposal removes that barrier to IPv6 adoption. I am in support.
Thank you. Next comment.
Merce Arnold, the Obsidian Group. Are there options for ARIN to include incubators or entrepreneurial efforts for small businesses to get IPv4 or IPv6 allocations early in the development process? For example, are there any data or evidence of the minimum viable product for allocations to launch an ISP or other mass consumer of IPv4 or IPv6 allocations?
Okay. And I think we have 2 more. So let's the next one, please.
Elisa Trotman, ARIN AC, unaffiliated. I support the policy as written. Being from a small Caribbean island with very small markets, this will assist IPv6 adoption. At the very least, it wouldn't cause the fee to be a deterrent.
Thank you. And the last one is from Joe Provo. Google, ARIN AC support the continued work here to drive better v6 adoption. And I see, can we just clarify that Kevin Bloomberg, is his hand still raised? I have John Kern and queue first, but went off that. Nope, okay. So the queue is now being closed, and I believe all the Q&A, I believe John Kern has a question for Andrew Dahl.
Right. So the question that comes up, and it's sort of one of the Q&A requesters brought this up, is it would be good for the community to understand when thinking about this policy proposal, what the change between /40 and /36 would be. Under current policy, an ISP who has a /24 of IPv4 gets a /36 if he asks for it of IPv6. Under this policy change, he would be able to ask for /40, therefore not changing his fee. Can I ask the AC or the presenter, how many customers using IPv6 can an ISP support with a /36 versus how many customers is he able to support with a /40? That might be good information to help the community consider this.
Andrew Dahl.
Yeah, so I think the number of customers one could support is dependent upon their end size allocation. So if you're using one of the IETF recommendations of a /48 per customer, giving a /40 would be 8 bits or 256 customers. If you're doing a /56, then you're at 16 bits or 65,000 customers. So is that answering the question that I think you were asking, John?
Yeah, to be clear, I guess
Owen has chimed in saying /36 in his view is 4,000 plus customers, and /40 is in his view is 200 plus customers, just a different data point.
Right. I guess there's concerns that an ISP who has a /24 v, the arguments against doing this because it enables nano allocations to an ISP, nano being /40. For the ISP who has a /24 of IPv4 space and only gets a /40 because they want to keep their fee low, they would be able to support at the IETF recommended allocation per customer, 256 customers, which is similar to what they have with their IPv4 allocation. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yeah. Assuming, there's no NAT involved. Of course,
right.
Many of the smallest ISPs do use NAT on their customers.
Sure. And similarly, presuming they use a 48 and not a 56 for their allocation. I guess I'm just trying to understand what sort of down pressure we're providing. A /48 is while enabling an ISP to ask for a /48 does seem like we're constraining them. I guess I wanted to characterize the constraint is not much more than they have currently on V4.
I would concur with that.
Okay, we're going to close discussion except for, and my apologies, I don't know what's going on, Robert Seastrom. You're apparently raising low in your hands and it may not be actually being seen. So my apology. So because of that technical issue, Robert, do you have something you want to interject and name affiliation again?
I was actually about to. I was dithering on whether to actually have my hand up. I wanted to. I concur with John and Andrew's point that to a greater or lesser extent the constraint is similar if one avoids doing unholy things, whether it's CGN or whether it's smaller end site allocations than we'd like to see. I'd also like to underline though that if we go back to the actual policy space, it is not merely the policy language does not merely facilitate them getting more space in a contiguous block. That's already possible, should they need it. That's already possible under ARIN's sparse allocation back office processes to get more adjoining space. What is the intent of the policy? And if it's not reading that way, please someone from staff let me know, is that if they get a 2/24, it immediately gets promoted to a double X rather than a triple X small, and there's no going back. It's a one-way door.
Okay. All right, we'll leave that as the last word, Robert. So thank you for Rob for that interesting, and that will end this discussion period. I thank Andrew Dahl for the presentation, and we are going to ask a poll question on this. I have verified the poll question this time, so as not to get myself into trouble. So the community is about to be asked whether or not you wish to continue working on the draft policy. So I'd ask you either to say yes or no to the poll question that's in front of you. Use the Q&A if you are having a problem with that. And if you are a panelist, please raise your hand if you'd like to speak something on the record. Unfortunately, we have to work through a few Zoom technicalities to do this. Give it about 20 seconds. I note that Celeste Anderson has put in a Q&A. Unfortunately, we've already closed our query, but I will make sure it's passed on to the advisory council, Celeste. Okay, let's close off the poll. And give a second just to tally results.
At the close of the poll, we had 100 attendees, 33 voted yes, and 15 no.
Okay, this feedback will be provided to the AC for their input. This ends our policy discussion for this ARIN 45 virtual meeting. I'd like to thank you all as the community for indulging us in this new process. And again, my thanks to the many tireless staff and the advisory council that work to try and shoehorn a process that I know many of us have been used to for many years into a virtual format in a short time border. We have 3 presentations coming up from your board that are all hopefully going to be very quick, including you get a double header from Nancy Carter, our treasurer and chair of the board governance working group. So we will turn it over to Nancy to give the quick updates.